Happy 15-year anniversary, everyone. Be sure to go get your Deathwing mount while you can. Shirley here. Blizzcon has came and gone this year already, and we got tons of exciting new announcements from that. I'm sure you guys have already seen most of them. So today I wanted to do something a little bit different, talking about upcoming WoW contents after the little news drop we got at BlizzCon. I want to talk about abilities, spells, and passives, all sorts of things that are going to be potentially returning to the game with the 9.0 patch in Shadowlands. And we got a few examples at BlizzCon, but being that I primarily play a warrior, I want to delve into basically what I want to see come back to warriors in 9.0. These are the things that I miss, all the time in BFA, especially playing Classic. Things that have, came and gone through various expansions and iterations, of course. So let's jump right into this. First off, I guess the two things that we got to see out of BlizzCon is Shattering Throw and Shield Block are the two examples they gave us coming back to Warriors, and the fact that Warriors and classes as a whole will have abilities tied to the class once again and less so much specs. So I would imagine that Mortal Strike, for example, is still going to be arms only, but they're broadening the abilities between all the specs again. So I would assume every spec of Warrior will get Shield Block and Shattering Throw back. Maybe Prot won't get Shattering Throw. I'm not sure about that. But talking briefly about those two, Shattering Throw, awesome. I'm really happy to see it come back. There's many times, you're just waiting on a mage and an ice block, and you just sitting there pressing that old button, remembering when you had Shattering Throw, and you just can't do anything about it. So, great news from that, regard. And the other one is Shield Block. This is interesting. I wonder how Shield Block is actually going to work in Modern WoW. I can't imagine they're going to make us make macros again and actually carry around a sword and shield like in Classic. Maybe it will be that way, but I kind of think it'll be something goofy, like defensive stances now, where it'll just magically make a shield appear in your hand and you'll just block. Maybe not. Maybe it'll be a little bit more RPG-ish than that. We'll have to wait and see. As far as defensives go, though, if that's all we're getting... going into 9.0, that won't be enough. I definitely want to see more returning. And off that, I think one of the things I would like to see come back for Warriors, both Arms and Fury especially, is Shield Wall, actually. I want to see two major defensives come back, not just Die by the Sword or Enrage Regen. Those cooldowns have been way too long for far too long. For example, Die by the Sword being 3-minute cooldown has just been silly. Like, that should have been cut in half years ago at this point. And ideally, they'd drop that way back down, maybe nerf it some and just make it parry again. I'd be fine with that. But give us Shield Wall back to, pick and choose between which defensive that we need to use on each situation as it demands. Anyway, going into my biggest thing right off that I want for Warriors coming into 9.0 is Charge Stun, actually. I want Charge Stun back probably more than anything. There's one thing that's kind of contentious to that, I suppose, but Charge Stun, coming from a PvP standpoint, and even in a PvE standpoint, is such an integral, useful thing in the Warrior toolkit. Charge used to be on a 12-second cooldown, and it stunned. And it didn't share a DR with any of their stuns in the game. It was its own, half-second thing. And it was so useful for interrupting and locking down things, and just being very disruptive in PvP. And that's one thing I miss about Warriors, is we were very disruptive. And nowadays, we're just kind of damage bots, and that's about it. We provide Sharpen and the occasional thing, Intimidating Shout and stuff, but really, I want to see Charge Stun come back. And the other thing that I really want to see come back, this is more of an arms thing than anything, but it actually goes into Fury and Prot some too, is I want to see Recklessness come back to arms. Like, when I made a warrior so long ago, it was all about you know, Recklessness, big burst, lots of numbers, and playing Classic again really just makes me want it back. Like, you pop Recklessness as an arms warrior on Classic, and you get a, you know, a fat mortal strike on somebody and follow it up with a snap whirlwind, and you can just kill everything around you, and that feels great, you know? Maybe not to the extent of Classic Recklessness. Obviously, we don't want it to be a 30-minute cooldown. Maybe not guaranteed crits, but, you know, something along the lines of, like, Mop Recklessness, but give it a 5-minute cooldown, you know, like 50% crit or something. But I want to see Recklessness come back to arms really bad. And on top of that, I want to see it's changed from what it is. Maybe it would work differently for Fury. I don't know, because it gives you the rage generation, and Fury's changed so much over the years that it doesn't really equate to the same thing. But I want big crit, you know, boosts back for arms at least. And on top of that, I want to see Heroic Strike come back, would be the next thing on my list. There are plenty of times playing arms in PvE right now, and I realize that a lot of people play Fury, but and Fury doesn't really require it because your only rage dump really is Rampage. But as arms, especially with our essence right now, Memory of Lucid Dreams, there are so many situations when you rage cap, and you can't play your rotation as effective as it should be, because a lot of times you just cut over power out of the equation. You have too much rage, like under Bloodlust or whatever, that you can't afford to use it because you want to be spending as much rage for Test of Might. And I realize Test of Might will be going away, so maybe it won't be as big of a problem in 9.0. But I still want an off GCD rage dump, and I want it to be more like Mop Heroic Strike, where it's just an instant hit, you know, that dumps rage, that it was like for a few years. Not so much the vanilla model where it's augmenting your next auto attack. You know, that's a bit archaic by today's standards. Speaking of archaic, I want to touch real quick on stances, I guess. I'm in the boat where two things, I guess, when it comes to warrior stances. I don't really care if they come back in the vanilla form, where it requires you to swap between every stance, and all your abilities require you being in a specific stance, and you can't maintain rage, or up to, you know, like 25, etc. What I do want to see come back is, for example, defensive stance. That needs to be baseline. That should not be a talent, and it should be available to all warrior specs. And if they don't want to bring back Zerker stance, fine, whatever. But battle stance and defensive stance should be something that all specs have at all times, that you can toggle between depending on the situation at hand. You know, that should be a stance thing, you know, depending on if you're taking damage or not, basically, or if you can afford to go into battle stance when you need to, etc. It'd be great to see Zerker stance come back, but I don't want to see it go back to the old macro system, basically. It's just unnecessary by today's standards. Another thing I'd like to see back that probably won't come is Throwdown from Cataclysm, the warrior stun. I really liked it. I think it was a nice mix of a stun on a 45-second cooldown for 5 seconds. And Stormbolt being a talent these days, maybe Throwdown should be baseline for everybody. We just get that melee stun on a single target, not shockwave, not whatever. And maybe if you take Stormbolt, it augments it, right? And makes it 30-yard or 30-second cooldown, 30-yard range. Maybe up the second on Stormbolt to 5 seconds to match it, not be 4. But I'd like to see Throwdown come back. Let's see here. I also would kind of like to see Deadly Calm come back as a baseline thing off GCD. Mostly because if we got Recklessness back, they're really fun to play with together. But, you know, you can't... Well, there were different patches when you couldn't macro them, but regardless, I'd like to see it come back because it's just fun being able to dump as much rage as possible, you know, as quick as possible. It's just a fun cooldown, frankly, and that's why Heroic Strike plays a big part of that as well. I would actually like to see... this one's kind of maybe might seem odd to some people, but I would like to see Warbreaker go away. That sounds like blasphemy, removing things. I think Colossus Smash is fine as a cooldown. I have no problem with the armor pen or the increased damage on that, but I think Warbreaker, for arms especially, it just puts way too much emphasis of the class on that one button and doing things. I would much rather see Bladestorm itself get buffed, like just buff it crazy, you know, make it do twice the damage it does now, and remove Warbreaker. That way we're not reliant on this combo to do AoE damage or any kind of burst. I would much rather Bladestorm itself be the scary cooldown that it should be, and you can have Recklessness with it if you want something really crazy. On top of that, I would like to see Intervene come back, because in the PvP toolkits, that's just one more disruption thing that we don't have anymore that was really nice. Mass Spell Reflect kind of fits in that same vein too. Being able to eat traps again would be nice, you know, things like that. Even catching the occasional melee hit was always really useful. And that's about it. There are a couple things, you know, obviously we're not going to get all this stuff, but I can dream, right? One thing that kind of has bugged me for a long time is Heroic Throw. Right now, it's just like, you know, pulling mobs. It's like a glorified taunt or whatever. It's not a taunt, but you know what I mean. I do miss Wrath Heroic Throw, where it was like a minute cooldown or whatever, and it actually did damage. And if you got a Heroic Throw crit, it did a ton of damage. I kind of like to see, you know, a cooldown range thing, like just one thing come back for Warriors to give us just a little bit of options. And last but not least, for flavor, I kind of like Bloodbath. If Bloodbath came back, I think that would be fun. It just looked cool. You put bleeds on everything. It felt very warrior-y. Anyway, that'll about sum it up for today's video, I think. What would you guys like to see come back for any class in the game? Frankly, these are just my thoughts. I'm probably forgetting something that I would like to see come back for Warriors. I'd like Moral Strike to do a lot of damage again, not just be like a bleed, slow burn class. But yeah, big crits would be nice. And I'll wrap it up there. Charge Stun, Recklessness, Heroic Strike. Those are the top 3 things I want to see come back to Arms as Toolkit especially. Thank you so much for watching, if you've made it this far, and I will see you next time. Peace.